Smita. I'm an educator by profession. I'm a Teach for India fellow. I taught in a government school between 2015 and 2017. Then I went on to teach at Shiv Nadar School in Noida here. And then I went on to start via News Didi, which is a learning platform for students where we aim to empower students with media literacy and solutions journalism. And it really sort of brings together two things that I'm very, very passionate about. One is public policy, so that's where the news and media literacy angle comes in. And just generally teaching and learning. I'm happiest in a classroom. So I think via News Didi sort of brings those two passions together for me. My association with Aarya began when I taught her at Shiv Nadar School as a social science teacher. And once I left the school, I continued to stay in touch with a couple of my students, and I had actually seen Aarya post her artwork on Instagram. And this is just when I had started via News Didi. And I saw the kind of work that she was doing, and I was very, very impressed. And I thought maybe I'll just ask her to do a couple of designs for the newsletter. And at that stage, it was just me sitting in one room typing out a newsletter every 2 weeks. And very graciously, Aarya agreed. And I think then on, we've spent countless hours over Zoom. So the last 2 years, we've worked online only. And I think in these 2 years is when I have really gotten to know Aarya as an individual. And also just gotten to witness what an incredibly talented and considerate individual she is. I think what truly makes her a leader is her ability to accept. I think her ability to be open to an alternate perspective. I think her ability to listen, which I think is a very, very undervalued skill. I remember, and Sukriti, my colleague, who's really building via News Didi with me, we often talk about, how Aarya used to be very, very quiet when she first started working with us. And never in a way that, it was problematic, or always in a way that it was interesting to observe. And now we see a shift where it's not that, Aarya's the one talking the most in any room. But now we see her speak a lot more, and I think a lot of that comes from just how closely she listens. So I think that those are some things that make her a great leader. I think one of the primary role that I play as an educator in ensuring that their VND is facilitated or does run through a student-teacher partnership is simply to hold space for my students. I think this happened rather organically, but I started to see, because maybe it began with just one student, that was Aarya, I began to see her more as my colleague and less as my student. I think in all my introductions of Aarya, if I'm meeting an external, my colleague Aarya as opposed to my student Aarya. And I think more credit goes to her than to me, honestly, because she brought her honest self into our online classroom, so to speak, or our workspace, and we just took it from there. Honestly, what really made us bring student voice into our work was that we saw that there was a major gap in what we thought students were thinking and feeling when they consume news and information, and what they were actually thinking and feeling. I thought as an educator I was very well placed to understand where students are coming from or how they process information. But I realized that the news is very, very dynamic, and not just when it comes to how children are processing it, but even as adults we all process it differently. And so I think we realized that we needed to hear from students themselves to be able to help them navigate through all of that news and information. I think we started out with that, and gradually as we brought on more and more students, as we spoke to more and more students about the news or their experience of consuming the news, we realized how much value they added, not just in informing our program design, so to speak, informing how we conduct sessions on media literacy, what kind of guidance and support we give to students. But it also really showed us the way forward. It made us realize that there was a bigger problem to tackle, which was that all of this information, along with all the mis and disinformation that they were consuming, is actually putting India in a position where the leaders of tomorrow that are sitting in classrooms today are actually not getting a sense of what is really happening in the real world, or what it takes to take on a challenge, or what it takes to solve a problem in the real world. And that's what we really got when we brought on more student voice. And so we saw the value in speaking to more and more students, holding space for more and more students. So that led us to start the student internship program, where we brought on 9 students and we got them to curate the newsletter with us. What that primarily meant, the newsletter and the podcast, and what that primarily meant was that we were engaging with more students about the news. So what is currently happening in the news? How does that make you feel? What do you think you can do about it, and so on. From there, we also came up, we realized that no amount of alternate journalism or solutions journalism is going to fix the problem of, this information ecosystem being incredibly polluted, right? So at some level, we realized that we had to empower students to be able to simply navigate through this mess of information. And that's where we pivoted to running from just being a solutions journalism outfit to focusing on media literacy as well, which is when we started interacting with more and more students through our Reimagining Media program, where we run workshops with students, workshops that are co-facilitated by journalists. And we get them to engage not only with media literacy issues, so identify what fake news is, identify propaganda and so on, but also be creators of media and information. I think one of my biggest realizations after I did the Teach for India fellowship about the education system in India was that we tend to undermine what our students are capable of. And I think working with Aarya and more students like Aarya, that realization has become even stronger. I think a reimagined education system for me is where students have a lot more agency to not just pursue the kind of education that they deem valuable, but also agency to speak their mind, also agency to actively make changes to an education system that's failing them. We were doing a newsletter on the new national education policy, and when I was doing research for that particular newsletter, it struck me that every single view, opinion, perspective that I read was from an educator, was from an expert, was from a politician, but there was not one view of a child. And to me that was baffling at that moment, right? Everybody was talking about how this is a momentous occasion that we are updating our education policy after so many years, and there was not one student voice. So, and I think that this realization became even starker because I had been working with children who I realized had so much to give, to share, so many insights to add, not just on their own education system, but possibly some of the biggest challenges plaguing our planet today. But nobody was asking them what they wanted their education system to look like. So I think to me, a reimagined education system is definitely one where students have a lot more agency.